Imagine the screen fading in from black to a dimly lit room, the sound of a heartbeat echoing in the background. The viewer is immediately drawn into an atmosphere thick with tension, a sense of unease settling over them like a heavy fog. A whisper, barely audible, slithers through the speakers. Some doors should never be opened. The camera slowly pans to an ancient, weathered key lying on a dusty table, the only source of light coming from a flickering candle, casting ominous shadows that seem to dance and writhe. As the whisper fades, a deep, foreboding voice takes over, drawing the viewer further into the story. This is not just a tale, but a confession, an account of something so deeply disturbing that it has haunted me every single day since it happened. You are about to step into a place where the boundaries between what is real and what is imagined are blurred, where the nightmares that plague your darkest thoughts take on a life of their own. The scene transitions to an old, imposing dormitory, its walls cracked and covered in peeling paint. As the voice continues, in the heart of this forsaken place lies a secret, a room that no one dares to speak of, a door that remains locked, as if holding back something that should never see the light of day. But I couldn't resist the pull. I had to know what lay beyond that door. The tension in the voice rises as the heartbeat in the background grows louder, more erratic. What I found behind that door was not just a room, but a gateway, a portal to a world where fear becomes flesh, where your darkest, most twisted fears come alive, and there is no escape. The video shows a close-up of a trembling hand reaching out, the key shaking as it is slowly inserted into a rusty lock. The voice drops to a whisper, almost conspiratorial. This is the story of how my curiosity led me to a place where nightmares are born and where sanity is the first thing to be lost. If you think you know fear, you are about to discover just how wrong you are. As the door creaks open, a gust of wind extinguishes the candle, plunging the screen into darkness. The voice, now filled with dread, leaves the viewer with a chilling invitation. If you dare to continue, know that what lies ahead will haunt you, just as it has haunted me. Like this video, subscribe to Mind's Labyrinth, and share it with those who think they can handle the terror that awaits. But be warned, once you step into the red room, there's no turning back. The screen remains black for a moment longer, the sound of the heartbeat slowly fading until there is nothing but silence. Then, without warning, a distorted, chilling scream rips through the silence, leaving the viewer on edge, their heart racing as they prepare to enter the story. The camera slowly fades in from the darkness, revealing the silhouette of an ancient, ivy-covered building standing alone on the edge of a desolate campus. The dormitory, known only by its foreboding nickname, the Hollow House, looms like a forgotten relic, its once grand architecture now crumbling under the weight of time and neglect. The sky above is perpetually overcast, casting a gloomy, oppressive pall over the grounds. A cold wind whispers through the dead branches of nearby trees, carrying with it the faintest echoes of long-forgotten secrets. As the viewer is drawn closer to the building, the details become more unsettling. The windows, cracked and clouded with age, seem to stare out like empty, soulless eyes. The walls are scarred with deep fissures, as if the very structure itself is trying to break free from something within. The entrance, a heavy oak door with rusting iron hinges, stands ajar, inviting yet menacing. Above it, an old, weather-beaten plaque bears the name Morton Hall, but the letters are barely legible, as though time itself is trying to erase any memory of this place. The voice of the narrator, now tinged with a sense of dread, cuts through the silence. Morton Hall, a place whispered about in hushed tones among students, a place with a history as dark as the shadows that inhabit it. Once a prestigious dormitory for the university's most promising minds, it now stands as a grim reminder of the horrors that lurk just beneath the surface of our reality. The scene shifts to the interior of the dormitory, where dust hangs heavy in the air, illuminated only by the weak light filtering through the dirty windows. The hallway is long and narrow, the floorboards creaking underfoot with every hesitant step. Old portraits line the walls, their subjects staring blankly, their eyes following anyone who dares to pass by. The wallpaper, once vibrant and lively, now peels away in strips, revealing the raw, scarred plaster beneath, like skin torn from flesh. The voice continues. The students who once lived here have long since moved on, but not all left willingly. Some say that they were driven mad by the whispers in the walls, by the things that moved in the shadows when no one was looking. Others, they simply vanished, leaving behind rooms filled with their belongings, as if they intended to return. But they never did. The camera moves through the hallway, passing by doors that are slightly ajar, each revealing a glimpse of the eerie stillness within. A desk left in disarray, papers scattered as if abandoned in haste. A bed with sheets still rumpled, as if the occupant had only just risen. Yet no one remains. The sense of abandonment, of lives suddenly and inexplicably interrupted, permeates the air. Finally, the camera stops before a door at the end of the hall, its surface marred by deep scratches, as if someone, or something, tried desperately to claw their way out. The number on the door, 237, is barely hanging on, the tarnished brass digits twisted and bent. The voice lowers to a whisper, but it's this room that holds the darkest secret of all, the door that no one dares to open, the room that even the bravest souls avoid. For inside lies something far more terrifying than the empty halls, more chilling than the ghostly whispers. Inside is a terror that transcends time, a darkness that feeds on fear itself. The camera hesitates, the view trembling as if the unseen protagonist is gathering the courage to approach. The hallway seems to stretch, the walls closing in as the door grows larger, more imposing. The sound of faint, disjointed whispers grows louder, as if the very walls are speaking, beckoning the viewer closer. The air grows colder, the shadows deeper, as if the building itself is alive, pulsing with malevolent energy. The voice concludes, filled with foreboding, what lies behind this door has driven those before you to the brink of madness. Yet, if you choose to enter, know that you are stepping into a place where reality and nightmare intertwine, where the mind's deepest fears are brought to life. The hollow house awaits. But beware, for once you cross the threshold, there is no escape from the horrors within. As the viewer stands before the door, the camera lingers, the tension building as the whispers crescendo into an unintelligible cacophony. The screen slowly fades to black, leaving only the sound of a heavy, ragged breath. And then, silence. The screen fades in from black to the dimly lit hallway of Morton Hall. The protagonist, whose footsteps echo ominously, moves cautiously down the corridor, each step punctuated by the creaking of the old floorboards. The air is thick with a suffocating stillness, as if the entire building is holding its breath, waiting. The flickering light bulbs overhead cast erratic shadows that seem to stretch and contort, as if reaching out to grasp at something unseen. There's an unsettling quiet that pervades the space, the kind that presses against your eardrums, amplifying even the faintest sounds. The rustle of clothing, the soft exhale of breath, the rapid thump of a heartbeat. The protagonist reaches room 237, hesitating before the scarred door. As their hand hovers over the tarnished doorknob, a sudden chill sweeps through the corridor, causing goosebumps to prickle across their skin. The silence is abruptly shattered by the distant sound of a door slamming somewhere in the dormitory, followed by the faint, unmistakable murmur of voices, a low, indistinct chatter that seems to emanate from the walls themselves. The protagonist's breath catches in their throat, and they quickly turn to look down the hall, but there's nothing there. Only the oppressive stillness remains, but now it's tinged with something more sinister, something alive. Deciding to ignore the unsettling noises, the protagonist steels themselves and slowly turns the doorknob. As the door creaks open, the room is revealed in increments, each detail more disturbing than the last. The room is eerily untouched, as if frozen in time. Dust particles hang suspended in the air, caught in the weak light filtering through the grimy window. The bed is neatly made, yet the sheets are an unsettling shade of crimson, as if stained with something that refuses to fade. The walls are adorned with faded, grotesque wallpaper, its patterns as distorted into shapes that seem almost like twisted faces, watching, leering. The protagonist steps inside, and the door creaks shut behind them with a heavy final sound. The atmosphere inside the room is even more oppressive, the air thick with an inexplicable dread. As they move further into the room, they notice the mirror on the wall, a large ornate piece with a frame that seems to writhe with carved figures. The glass, however, is cracked, splintering the reflection into jagged, fragmented images. As the protagonist gazes into it, they suddenly notice something strange. Their reflection doesn't quite match their movements. A slight delay, a hesitation that shouldn't be there, and then, as they move to step away, their reflection remains frozen, staring back at them with eyes that seem just a little too dark, too hollow, heart-pounding. The protagonist quickly looks away, but the feeling of being watched doesn't dissipate. Instead, it intensifies. They start to notice other things, a faint rhythmic tapping sound that seems to come from within the walls, growing louder and more insistent with each passing second. The temperature in the room drops sharply, their breath now visible in the frigid air. The walls seem to close in, and the shadows in the corners deepen, as if something within them is moving, shifting. Suddenly, the tapping stops, replaced by a low, sinister whisper. It's unintelligible at first, just a hissing noise that slithers through the room, but it slowly begins to form words. Words that the protagonist can't quite make out, but that fill them with a deep, primal fear. They strain to listen, feeling a cold sweat break out on their forehead. And then with a sudden, chilling clarity, they hear it. Their own name, whispered in a voice that is eerily familiar, yet distorted, as if heard through a broken, warped filter. Panic grips the protagonist. They turn sharply towards the source of the voice, but there's no one there. Just the empty, suffocating room. The walls seem to pulse, as if alive, as if something is trapped within, trying to break free. The shadows stretch further, and the whispers grow louder, now accompanied by a soft scratching sound, like fingernails scraping against wood. The protagonist's heart races, their pulse pounding in their ears as they realize they are not alone in the room. Desperately, they back away, their eyes darting around, searching for the source of the terror that now surrounds them. The door to the room suddenly slams shut with a deafening bang, and the room is plunged into darkness, the only light now coming from the faint glow of the cracked mirror. In the reflection, the protagonist sees something that shouldn't be there, a figure standing just behind them, its features obscured by shadow, but its presence undeniable. The figure leans closer, its breath icy on the back of their neck, and whispers in that same distorted voice, "You shouldn't have opened the door." The protagonist spins around, but there's nothing there. Only the empty dark room, now filled with an overwhelming sense of dread. The scratching continues, more frantic, more desperate, and the whispers echo through the room, their words incomprehensible, yet filled with malice. The protagonist realizes with dawning horror that whatever is in this room is trying to escape, and that they've unleashed something far beyond their comprehension. The screen fades to black as the protagonist stumbles towards the door, their breath ragged, their mind reeling. The last sound the viewer hears is a single, final whisper, chilling in its simplicity. It's too late. The screen goes silent, leaving the audience in a state of suspense, their own imaginations filling in the terrifying possibilities of what comes next. As the protagonist reels from the strange events unfolding within the confines of room 237, the once solid ground of their reality begins to crumble beneath them. Their mind, once a fortress of logic and reason, now feels like a fragile house of cards, teetering on the brink of collapse. They try to shake off the creeping sensation of dread that clings to them like a second skin, but it only grows stronger, tightening its grip around their thoughts, suffocating any remnants of rationality. The whispers that once echoed faintly within the room now seem to follow them everywhere, growing louder and more insistent, as if they've burrowed into the very core of their consciousness. These voices, distorted and overlapping, murmur words they cannot fully understand. Yet the tone is unmistakable, malicious, taunting, and full of cruel intent. The protagonist begins to doubt their own senses. They question whether the things they are experiencing are real or if their mind is unraveling, caught in the web of an unimaginable nightmare from which there is no escape. Every sound, every flicker of movement at the edge of their vision becomes a potential threat. The shadows in the room seem to stretch and move on their own, defying the light, playing tricks on their eyes. Are those just tricks of the mind, or are they manifestations of something far more sinister, lurking just out of sight? Their reflection in the cracked mirror no longer feels like their own. Every time they dare to glance at it, they see something different. Subtle changes in the expression, the eyes darker, the mouth twisted into a faint mocking grin that wasn't there before. The protagonist starts to retreat inward, their thoughts swirling in a vortex of fear and confusion. They try to reason with themselves, to cling to logic, but every attempt is thwarted by the overwhelming sense that they are no longer in control. Their mind betrays them, dredging up memories long buried, twisting them into something grotesque and unfamiliar. Faces of people they once knew flash before them, but distorted, hollowed out. Their eyes empty voids that reflect the abyss the protagonist feels themselves slipping into. Paranoia begins to set in, wrapping its cold fingers around their psyche. They start to believe that they are being watched, constantly, relentlessly. Every creak of the floorboards, every groan of the old building feels like a footstep, a sign that something is creeping closer. They catch glimpses of movement in the corners of their eyes. But when they turn to look, there's nothing there, just the empty, oppressive room. But the feeling persists, gnawing at them, whispering that they are never truly alone. The protagonist's internal monologue becomes a battleground of conflicting thoughts. One moment, they try to convince themselves that this is all a hallucination, a product of stress and an overactive imagination. The next, they're gripped by the certainty that what they're experiencing is terrifyingly real. They question everything. Did they really hear those whispers? Did they really see that shadow move? Are the memories of their past even their own, or have they been planted by something malevolent? Sleep becomes impossible. Every time they close their eyes, they're bombarded by horrific visions, images of twisted, contorted figures, of endless dark corridors, and of that damn room, with its mocking whispers and shifting shadows. The boundary between dreams and waking life dissolves, leaving them in a constant state of disorientation. They begin to lose track of time, of days and nights, blurring together in a haze of fear and exhaustion. Their interactions with the outside world become strained. Conversations with others feel distant, surreal, as if they are speaking through a thick veil that separates them from reality. They can't trust their own words, can't trust the reactions of others. Are they being honest, or are they part of some grand, sinister deception? The protagonist's paranoia extends to their friends and loved ones. They begin to suspect that everyone around them is somehow involved, that they are all watching, waiting for the moment they finally snap. Their isolation deepens, both physically and mentally. The protagonist withdraws into themselves, avoiding contact, avoiding anything that might pull them further into the abyss. But the more they try to escape, the more the room seems to reach out to them, pulling them back with an invisible, irresistible force. The whispers grow louder, the shadows darker, and the feeling of being watched becomes unbearable. They start to believe that the room is alive, that it has a mind of its own, and that it's toying with them, enjoying their descent into madness. The protagonist's thoughts turn darker, more desperate. They contemplate the unthinkable. Perhaps the only way to escape the room's grip is to end it all, to sever the connection between mind and body before they are completely consumed. But even in this, there's doubt. What if that's exactly what the room wants? What if by giving in, they're playing right into its hands? The protagonist's mind spirals. The once clear line between reality and nightmare now a chaotic blur. Every decision feels wrong, every thought tainted by the room's influence. They begin to doubt their own existence, questioning whether they were ever truly in control of their life or if they've always been a pawn in some dark, twisted game. The sense of self erodes, leaving them vulnerable, exposed, and terrified of the darkness that lies both outside and within. As the camera lingers on the protagonist's haunted expression, their eyes hollow and filled with terror, the viewer is left to wonder how much of what they're experiencing is real, and how much is the product of a mind that has been pushed beyond the brink. The screen fades to black, leaving the viewer with the unsettling realization that sometimes the greatest horrors are not those we encounter in the world around us, but those that arise from within our own minds. The protagonist, now teetering on the edge of sanity, knows that the only way to find answers is to confront whatever malevolent force is haunting them. The suffocating dread that has plagued their every waking moment is now coupled with a grim determination. They can no longer avoid the truth, no longer hide from the shadows that have been closing in. The only way out, it seems, is through. As night falls, the protagonist returns to room 237, their heart pounding in their chest like a war drum. The hallway leading to the room seems longer than before, the walls narrowing as if the building itself is trying to trap them. Each step echoes ominously, a reminder that they are walking deeper into the jaws of something sinister, something beyond human comprehension. The air is thick, almost tangible, pressing down on them, making it hard to breathe. The whispers have returned, but now they are clearer, sharper, as if the voices are no longer content to stay hidden. With a trembling hand, the protagonist grips the doorknob. It's cold, unnaturally so, as if all the warmth has been drained from it. As they push the door open, it resists slightly, as though something on the other side is trying to hold it shut. But with a surge of strength born from desperation, they force it open, and the room is revealed once more. But this time, it's different. The room is no longer just a space within the dormitory. It feels like an entirely separate realm, a place where the rules of reality no longer apply. The walls pulse with a sickly reddish glow, as if they are alive, breathing. The shadows, once confined to the corners, now swirl openly, coalescing into forms that are almost, but not quite, human. These shadowy figures move with a disturbing fluidity, their shapes constantly shifting, as if they are struggling to maintain a corporeal form. The protagonist's breath hitches as they step inside, the door slamming shut behind them with a finality that sends a shiver down their spine. The temperature plummets, their breath visible in the frigid air. The whispers grow louder, circling around them like a predatory animal. The words are still unclear, but the tone is unmistakably menacing, filled with a cold, calculating malice. It's as if the room itself is speaking to them, taunting them for daring to return. In the center of the room, the mirror remains, but it too has changed. The cracks have widened, spiderwebbing across the surface, and through the fractures, the protagonist glimpses something terrifying. The reflection shows the room, but not as it is. There's a figure standing in the middle, facing away from the mirror. It's not the protagonist, but rather a dark silhouette, its edges blurred and indistinct. The figure's head is tilted, as if listening, and slowly, it begins to turn. The protagonist feels an icy terror grip their heart as the figure in the mirror turns to face them. Its features are obscured, but the eyes, those hollow black voids, are unmistakable. They stare back with an intensity that makes the protagonist feel as though they are being pulled into the mirror, into the darkness that lies beyond the glass. The figure's mouth moves, forming words that echo in the protagonist's mind rather than in the air around them. You shouldn't have come back. Suddenly, the room around them begins to distort. The walls stretch and warp, the shadows growing longer, darker. The whispers converge into a deafening roar, a cacophony of voices all speaking at once, yet saying nothing comprehensible. The pressure in the room becomes unbearable, as if the very air is pressing in on them, crushing them from all sides. The protagonist stumbles backward, their mind reeling. But there's nowhere to run, nowhere to hide. Desperate, they turn away from the mirror only to find that the shadows in the room have taken on solid forms. Figures emerge from the darkness, their faces featureless, their bodies twisted into grotesque shapes. They move towards the protagonist with a deliberate slowness, as if savoring the fear they are causing. The protagonist can feel the cold emanating from them, a cold that seeps into their bones, freezing them in place. The room begins to spin, the walls closing in, and the floor beneath their feet feels like it's giving way. The protagonist knows they have to confront whatever is behind this, but the sheer terror paralyzes them. They try to scream, but the sound is swallowed by the overwhelming noise of the whispers, the shadows, the room itself. In a final act of defiance, the protagonist focuses on the figure in the mirror. They feel an inexplicable connection to it, as though it is the key to everything. The source of their torment, the answer to their questions. With all the strength they can muster, they step towards the mirror, their reflection distorted by the cracks, but still recognizably their own. They reach out, their hand trembling, and touch the surface of the glass. The moment their fingers make contact, the room goes silent. The shadows freeze, the whispers stop, and the oppressive weight lifts. But before they can take a breath, the mirror shatters completely, exploding outward with a force that sends them sprawling to the ground. The glass cuts into their skin, but the pain is nothing compared to the horror that follows. From the shattered remains of the mirror, a figure emerges, no longer just a reflection, but a tangible, horrifying entity. It's a twisted version of the protagonist, a doppelganger that exudes an aura of pure evil. Its eyes are black voids, and its mouth is twisted into a cruel, mocking smile. It steps forward, and with each step, the room darkens further, the shadows gathering around it like a cloak. The protagonist tries to move, to escape, but they are rooted to the spot, terror coursing through their veins like ice. The doppelganger leans in close, its voice a low, menacing whisper that seems to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. "You belong to us now." With those words, the shadows surge forward, enveloping the protagonist in darkness. The cold seeps into their very soul, and they feel themselves being pulled down, deeper and deeper, into a place where light and hope do not exist. The last thing they see before everything goes black is the doppelganger's face, twisted in a grotesque parody of their own, and the realization that they have lost this battle, that they have become part of the darkness. Another shadow in room 237. The screen fades to black, leaving the viewer in a state of breathless suspense, their mind reeling from the sheer intensity of the confrontation. The sound of a single heartbeat echoes in the silence, slowly fading until there is nothing left but darkness. As the protagonist is swallowed by the suffocating darkness, they feel their consciousness slipping away, as if they are being pulled into a bottomless abyss. The world around them ceases to exist. No more walls, no more floor. Only the inky void that stretches out infinitely in every direction. The air is cold and thick, each breath a struggle against the overwhelming pressure that bears down on them from all sides. For a moment there is nothing but the void, an all-encompassing emptiness that threatens to erase their very existence. But then, as if from a great distance, a faint light appears. It's a sickly, unnatural glow, pale and cold, but it cuts through the darkness like a knife. The protagonist, desperate and terrified, focuses on the light, using it as a lifeline to pull themselves back from the edge of oblivion. Slowly, the light grows brighter, revealing the outline of a door, an ancient, weathered door that seems to float in the void, suspended by some unseen force. Compelled by a mixture of fear and curiosity, the protagonist reaches for the door, their hand trembling as it hovers just inches from the rough, splintered wood. They can feel the cold radiating from it, a deep, bone-chilling cold that seeps into their flesh. With a deep breath, they push the door open, and it swings wide with an agonizing creak, revealing what lies beyond. The door opens into a space that defies logic and reason. It's a twisted reflection of the room they were just in, a but everything is wrong, distorted, warped, like a nightmare version of reality. The walls twist and curve unnaturally, the furniture is broken and splintered, and the air is filled with a faint, acrid smell of decay. The sickly light casts long, unnatural shadows that stretch and twist, their shapes resembling grotesque, writhing figures. In the center of the room stands the doppelganger, the twisted mirror image of the protagonist. But now it is fully formed, solid and real. Its eyes, dark and hollow, stare directly at the protagonist with an intensity that burns into their soul. The doppelganger's presence exudes an aura of malevolence so strong that it seems to warp the space around it, bending the very fabric of reality. The protagonist, frozen in place, watches in horror as the doppelganger slowly raises its hand, pointing directly at them. Its mouth moves, forming words that seem to reverberate through the room, each syllable dripping with malice and cruelty. "This is your truth," it says, its voice a twisted echo of the protagonist's own. "You are not who you think you are." As the words sink in, the room around them begins to shift and change. The walls ripple like the surface of a disturbed pond, and the shadows on the floor begin to take shape, forming figures that are all too familiar. The protagonist's eyes widen in terror as they recognize the faces of these shadowy figures. They are people from their past, people they've wronged, people they've forgotten, and people they never knew existed. Each face is twisted in anguish, their mouths open in silent screams of torment. The doppelganger's voice continues, relentless and cruel. "You thought you could bury the past, hide from the truth, but the darkness within you has grown, feeding on your fears, your guilt, your lies. It has taken form, and now it will consume you." The protagonist, overwhelmed by the horrifying revelation, feels the ground beneath them give way, and they are suddenly falling. The room, the figures, the doppelganger, all dissolve into the void, leaving only the protagonist plummeting through darkness. Their mind races, trying to make sense of what they've just seen, but the truth is too much to bear. The realization that the doppelganger is a manifestation of their own inner darkness, a twisted reflection of everything they've tried to hide from, is a blow that shatters the last remnants of their sanity. As they fall, memories flood their mind, fragments of a life they've long since forgotten, or perhaps never knew. Images flash before their eyes: a childhood home, an argument, a tragic accident, a moment of betrayal. Each memory is tinged with guilt, regret, and sorrow, and each one is a piece of the puzzle that the protagonist had refused to put together. The truth, buried deep within their subconscious, is now laid bare, and it is a truth more horrifying than any nightmare. The protagonist hits the ground with a jarring impact, but there is no pain, only the cold, unyielding surface beneath them. They find themselves in a new room, a place that feels both familiar and alien. It's a small, dimly lit space, the walls lined with mirrors that reflect countless versions of themselves, each one more distorted and grotesque than the last. The mirrors surround them, trapping them in a maze of reflections that offer no escape. In the center of the room, the doppelganger waits, its twisted smile stretching impossibly wide. "This is your prison," it says, its voice a low, menacing growl. "You cannot escape yourself." The protagonist, now fully aware of the horrifying truth, tries to run. But every path leads back to the same spot, the same twisted reflection. The mirrors close in, the space growing smaller, tighter, suffocating. The reflections laugh, their voices merging into a cacophony of madness that echoes endlessly in the protagonist's mind. Desperate, the protagonist smashes the mirrors, but with each shatter, a new reflection emerges, more twisted, more monstrous than the last. The room seems to pulse with a life of its own, feeding off the protagonist's fear and despair. The doppelganger's laughter fills the air, a sound that reverberates through the very bones of the room, shaking the protagonist to their core. In a final, desperate act, the protagonist confronts the doppelganger directly. their voice trembling with a mixture of fear and anger. "What do you want from me?" they demand, their words echoing in the confined space. The doppelganger steps closer, its presence overwhelming, suffocating. "I want you to see," it whispers, its voice soft but filled with malice. "See the truth. Accept it. Embrace it." With those words, the mirrors shatter all at once, the glass fragments swirling around the protagonist like a storm of razor-sharp blades. But instead of cutting, they merge into the protagonist's skin, becoming part of them. The pain is unbearable, a searing agony that burns through every nerve, but the protagonist can't escape it. The truth, now part of them, is inescapable. The room begins to fade, the darkness returning, but this time, it is not the external void that terrifies the protagonist. It is the darkness within, the part of them that they can no longer deny. As the last of the light disappears, the doppelganger's voice lingers in the air, a final, chilling reminder. You are me, and I am you. We are one, forever. The screen fades to black, leaving the viewer with a sense of deep, unsettling horror. The revelation that the true terror lies not in external monsters, but in the darkness of one's own soul, lingers long after the story ends. The silence that follows is heavy, oppressive, as if the viewer too has been drawn into the protagonist's nightmare, left to grapple with the chilling truth that there are some doors that should never be opened, and some truths that are too terrifying to face. The protagonist, now merged with the truth of their own darkness, finds themselves standing in what appears to be the remnants of the room that once was, a space that feels both eerily familiar and profoundly alien. The walls, though still standing, are cracked and decayed, oozing a thick dark substance that seems to pulse with a life of its own. The air is dense, heavy with the scent of rot and something far worse, something that reeks of despair and hopelessness. It's a place where time seems to stand still, where the very fabric of reality has been twisted and torn, leaving only the remnants of what once was. The protagonist's mind, now fractured, struggles to make sense of their surroundings. They know that they are no longer in the real world, but in a liminal space, a purgatory of their own making, where the boundaries between the self and the shadows that haunt them have been irreparably blurred. The doppelganger, their dark reflection, is gone, but its presence lingers like a shadow at the edge of their consciousness, a constant reminder of the horrors they have faced. They look down at their hands and see the fragments of the shattered mirror embedded in their skin, the glass gleaming in the dim light. Each piece reflects a different version of themselves, a different face of the nightmare they have become. The pain, once searing and all-consuming, has dulled to a cold numbness that spreads through their entire body. They are no longer fully themselves, no longer fully human, just a collection of broken pieces held together by the weight of their own guilt and fear. In the distance, the protagonist hears a faint sound, a rhythmic, metallic clanging that echoes through the decayed halls. It's a sound that fills them with dread, but also with a strange sense of inevitability. They know deep down that there is no escaping this place, no return to the life they once knew. But the sound calls to them, beckoning them forward, urging them to confront whatever lies ahead. With heavy, reluctant steps, the protagonist follows the sound, moving deeper into the heart of the decaying structure. The walls seem to close in around them, the darkness growing thicker, more oppressive with each passing moment. The light is almost gone now, reduced to a faint, flickering glow that barely illuminates the path ahead. The shadows that line the walls seem to move with a life of their own, writhing and twisting in ways that defy explanation. Finally, the protagonist reaches the source of the sound, a door, much like the one they had opened before, but this one is different. It's smaller, more unassuming, but it radiates an aura of cold, impenetrable darkness that chills them to the bone. The clanging sound continues, rhythmic and unrelenting, as if something, or someone, on the other side is trying to break through. The protagonist knows that this is the final threshold, the last barrier between them and the truth they have been running from all along. They hesitate, their hand hovering over the doorknob, their heart pounding in their chest. The fear is overwhelming, a primal terror that grips them with an iron fist, but they know they cannot turn back. With a deep, shaky breath, they grasp the doorknob and push the door open. What they see on the other side is both horrifying and strangely familiar. It's the room from their childhood, the place where they had experienced their first taste of true fear, the place where the seeds of their nightmares had been planted. The walls are covered in old, faded wallpaper, the floor littered with toys and trinkets from a time long past. But the room is not as they remember it. It's warped, distorted, the colors too bright, the angles all wrong. It's as if the room has been twisted by the same darkness that now resides within them. In the center of the room stands a figure, its back turned to the protagonist. It's a child, small and fragile, dressed in clothes that seem out of place in the decayed surroundings. The child is holding a small, tarnished mirror in their hands, the same mirror that had shattered and embedded itself in the protagonist's skin. The clanging sound has stopped, replaced by an eerie silence that fills the room with a suffocating tension. The protagonist steps forward, their movements slow and deliberate, their breath coming in short, shallow gasps. They know that this child is not real, but a manifestation of their deepest fears, their darkest memories brought to life. But they also know that they must confront it, must face the truth that lies at the heart of their nightmare. As they approach, the child slowly turns to face them, revealing a face that is both innocent and terrifying. The child's eyes are wide and empty, reflecting nothing but the void that surrounds them. The mirror in their hands glows with a faint, eerie light, casting twisted shadows on the walls. The child's expression is one of sorrow and fear, but also of something darker, something that lies just beneath the surface. The protagonist kneels down in front of the child, their hands trembling as they reach out to take the mirror. The child offers no resistance, their cold, lifeless eyes locked onto the protagonist's face. As their hands touch the mirror, the room around them begins to dissolve, the walls crumbling, the floor disintegrating into nothingness. The light fades, the darkness closes in, and the protagonist is left holding the mirror, their reflection staring back at them with a look of despair. But the reflection is not their own. It's the face of the doppelganger, twisted and distorted, its eyes filled with the same void that had stared back at them from the child's eyes. The realization hits them with the force of a tidal wave. The doppelganger was not just a reflection, not just a manifestation of their fears, but a part of them. A part that they had tried to bury, to hide from the world and from themselves. The mirror cracks, the reflection shattering into 1,000 pieces, and the darkness consumes them. The protagonist feels themselves falling once again, but this time there is no bottom, no end. They are lost in the void, a prisoner of their own mind, their own fears, their own darkness. And then, just as suddenly as it began, it's over. The protagonist is back in the dormitory, standing in the hallway outside room 237. The door is closed, the hallway silent and still. The air is warm, the light soft and comforting. It's as if nothing had happened, as if the nightmare was just a figment of their imagination. But they know better. The darkness is still there, lurking beneath the surface, waiting for the moment when they let their guard down. The doppelganger is still with them, a shadow in the corner of their mind, a reminder of the horrors they have faced and the truths they have uncovered. The protagonist walks away from the room, their steps slow and heavy, their mind racing with the knowledge that they can never truly escape the darkness within. They are changed, broken in ways that can never be mended, but they have survived. For now, as they reach the end of the hallway, they pause, glancing back at the door one last time. The number 237 gleams faintly in the dim light, a reminder of the nightmare that awaits anyone who dares to enter. The protagonist turns away, walking into the light. But the shadows follow, always just a step behind. The screen fades to black, leaving the viewer with a deep, unsettling sense of unease. The story may be over, but the terror, the fear, the mystery, those remain, lingering in the mind like a dark, twisted memory that can never be forgotten. The final sound is a faint whisper, echoing in the darkness. It's never really over. The protagonist, now forever changed by the horrors they have faced, tries to return to a semblance of normalcy. But even as they step back into the world beyond Morton Hall, the light of day seems somehow dimmer, the air colder, as if the shadows of room 237 have followed them, clinging to their very soul. The campus, once bustling with life and energy, now feels eerily quiet. The familiar sights and sounds muted, as if viewed through a thick, dark veil. Every corner, every whisper of the wind, every flicker of movement in the periphery of their vision carries the lingering presence of the nightmare they barely escaped. The protagonist's thoughts are a whirlwind of fear and confusion, their mind replaying the events over and over, trying to make sense of the impossible things they have seen and heard. But the more they try to rationalize, the more they feel themselves slipping away, their grip on reality weakening with each passing moment. The world around them has lost its solidity, its certainty, replaced by an ever-present sense of dread, as if at any moment the horrors they encountered might re-emerge from the shadows to drag them back into the darkness. Sleep offers no respite. Each night, the protagonist is haunted by vivid, disturbing dreams, visions of the doppelganger, the twisted reflection that still lives within them, watching, waiting. In these dreams, they are back in room 237, standing before the shattered mirror, the pieces of their fractured self staring back with hollow, accusing eyes. The whispers return, louder and more insistent, filling their mind with thoughts they cannot control, with fears they cannot escape. The line between dream and reality blurs, and they wake each morning drenched in sweat, the echoes of their nightmare still ringing in their ears. As they go about their daily life, the protagonist becomes increasingly aware of how fragile their sanity has become. They catch glimpses of the doppelganger in reflective surfaces, a fleeting shadow in a window, a distorted face in a puddle of water, always there, lurking just beneath the surface. Conversations with friends and colleagues feel distant, surreal, as if they are speaking from the other side of a vast chasm. The protagonist smiles, nods, responds as expected, but inside, they are screaming, desperately trying to hold on to the last remnants of their sanity. The paranoia intensifies. The protagonist begins to suspect that everyone around them knows what they've been through, that they are all in on some terrible secret. Every glance, every whispered conversation seems to be about them. Every moment feels like they are being watched, judged. They avoid mirrors, knowing that the reflection they see is no longer their own. But even without the mirrors, they feel the doppelganger's presence, a constant malevolent shadow that haunts their every step. One day, unable to take the pressure any longer, the protagonist decides to confront the source of their torment. They return to Morton Hall, to room 237, hoping that somehow, facing the darkness again will free them from its grip. But as they stand before the door, the memories flood back with terrifying clarity, and they realize that they are not ready, that they may never be ready to face what lies beyond that threshold again. The door remains closed, its secrets locked away, but the fear, the terror, is still very much alive within them. The protagonist turns away from the door, feeling defeated, but also strangely relieved. They know now that the darkness within them can never be fully banished, that it is a part of them as much as their own flesh and blood. But they also know that they cannot let it consume them, that they must learn to live with the fear, to control it, rather than let it control them. It is a delicate balance, one that they will struggle with every day for the rest of their life. In the days that follow, the protagonist makes a conscious effort to reclaim their life, to push back against the darkness that threatens to engulf her. They take up new hobbies, surround themselves with friends, immerse themselves in work, anything to keep the shadows at bay. But no matter how busy they make themselves, the memories remain, the fear always lurking at the edges of their consciousness. They are forever changed, haunted by the knowledge of what they have seen, of what they have become. And yet, there is a part of them that is drawn to the darkness, that feels an inexplicable connection to the horrors they have faced. They find themselves researching old, forgotten tomes, delving into the occult, trying to understand the forces that shape their nightmare. They become obsessed with finding answers, with discovering the truth behind room 237, behind the doppelganger. It is a dangerous path, one that leads them deeper into the unknown, but they cannot resist the pull. The darkness, once a source of terror, has become a strange, twisted comfort, a reminder that they are not alone. The screen shows the protagonist in a darkened room, hunched over a desk, cluttered with old books and strange artifacts, their face illuminated by the flickering light of a single candle. Their eyes are wide, haunted, but also filled with a grim determination. The camera slowly zooms in on their face, capturing every detail. The lines of stress, the dark circles under their eyes, the faint twitch of their mouth as they mutter to themselves, lost in their thoughts. In the background, a mirror hangs on the wall, its surface cracked and tarnished. As the camera pulls back, the reflection in the mirror begins to shift, the image of the protagonist dissolving into the familiar, twisted face of the doppelganger. It watches silently, its expression unreadable, but there is a sense of satisfaction in its dark eyes, as if it knows that it has won, that the protagonist is now and forever will be a part of its world. The final shot is of the protagonist, oblivious to the reflection behind them, lost in their search for answers. The camera lingers for a moment, the tension thick, the shadows deep, and then the screen fades to black. The silence that follows is heavy, oppressive, leaving the viewer with a lingering sense of dread, of unease, as if the story is not truly over, but only just beginning. The last sound is a faint whisper, barely audible, but unmistakable in its intent. We are one, forever. The words echo in the darkness, leaving the viewer with the unsettling realization that the protagonist's journey is far from over, that the terror will continue, always lurking in the shadows, waiting for the moment to strike again. The story may have reached its conclusion, but the fear, the mystery, the darkness, they will remain, a permanent scar on the protagonist's soul, and a chilling reminder of the horrors that lie just beneath the surface of our reality.